From the ashes of the frontier and the heartbeat of America's farms, one name would rise, a name forged in steel and tempered by struggle: John Deere. What began with a single plow would spark a revolution, a legacy that powered generations through droughts, depressions, and wars. But behind the green and gold lies a story few truly know, a story of bold innovation, near disaster, and the relentless will to endure. How did a blacksmith's dream become a global force, and what trials nearly brought it to its knees? This is the entire history of John Deere, a story of grit, steel, and a spirit that refused to break, the plow that changed America. The year was 1837, and America's heartland was a battlefield of mud and dreams. In the vast, untamed prairies of the Midwest, settlers came chasing a promise: rich soil, endless land, a new life. But that promise was buried beneath a problem no one could solve. Their cast-iron plows, designed for the sandy soils of the East, choked and clogged in the thick, sticky clay of the frontier. Each furrow was a fight, each acre a war. The land that was supposed to feed a nation refused to yield. In a small blacksmith shop in Grand Detour, Illinois, one man watched this struggle with a craftsman's eye and a farmer's empathy. His name was John Deere. He wasn't a tycoon or a visionary inventor, just a hard-working smith known for his skill and honesty. But what set him apart wasn't power, it was curiosity. As he repaired broken plows for weary farmers, he saw the flaw in their design. The soil didn't stick because it was stubborn. It stuck because the plows were wrong. One day, while reshaping a discarded steel saw blade, Deere had a revelation. Steel, smoother, stronger, and lighter than iron, could cut through the prairie's gumbo soil and shed it cleanly. It was a simple idea, yet revolutionary. With hammer and forge, Deere crafted his first self-scouring steel plow, a tool that didn't fight the land, but worked with it. When he tested it in the fields, farmers watched in awe. The plow sliced through earth like a knife through butter. No clogging, no frustration. For the first time, the prairie yielded easily, and with it, a new era began. But this wasn't just an invention. It was a turning point in American agriculture. Deere's plow unlocked the Midwest, transforming it into the breadbasket of a growing nation. It empowered farmers, fueled westward expansion, and laid the foundation for what would become one of the world's most iconic industrial legacies. Still, John Deere's success didn't come overnight. Many doubted him. Steel was expensive and rare in America at the time. Critics said his idea was impractical, too costly, and too fragile for real farming. But Deere wasn't just building a tool, he was building trust. He told farmers, "I will never put my name on a plow that does not have in it the best that is in me." It wasn't a slogan, it was a promise, one that would define the brand for generations. As word spread, orders poured in. By 1848, Deere moved his growing operation to Moline, Illinois, a city with better access to waterways and raw materials. From a one-man forge, he built a company that produced thousands of plows a year. Soon, the singing plow, as farmers called it, became a symbol of progress, a chorus of steel ringing across the prairie, echoing the spirit of American resilience. But hidden beneath this early triumph was a question that would haunt the company for decades. Could a humble blacksmith's vision survive the forces of industry, competition, and time? Because this wasn't just the story of a plow. It was the beginning of a brand, a promise, and an identity, one forged in the sweat of farmers and the spark of innovation. The green and yellow colors that would one day dominate fields across the world had not yet been born, but their soul was already alive. Honesty, hard work, and a relentless belief in better tools for better lives. In the decades to come, John Deere and Company would grow from that single plow into a global empire. But not without trials, missteps, and near disasters. The company would face wars, depressions, revolutions in technology, and crises that threatened its very existence. And yet, each time, it would return to the spirit of its founder. the idea that real progress comes from understanding the people you serve. From a blacksmith's forge to a world leader in machinery, the story of John Deere began not with ambition, but with empathy. It began with a man who listened to the land and built a tool that changed it forever. Because sometimes history doesn't start with a battle or a crown. Sometimes it starts with a plow, forging the green giant, early growth and identity. By the mid-1800s, John Deere's plow had done more than till the soil. It had planted the seeds of an empire. What began in a modest blacksmith shop in Grand Detour was now spreading across the American frontier, carried on wagons and the growing trust of farmers. But turning a brilliant idea into a lasting legacy would take more than craftsmanship. It would demand vision, leadership, and the courage to build something bigger than one man's forge. In 1848, John Deere moved his operations to Moline, Illinois, a city strategically placed along the Mississippi River. With access to waterways, raw materials, and trade routes, Moline became the beating heart of a company destined for greatness. Here, Deere shifted from local artisan to industrial pioneer. He began using mass production techniques, assembling teams of workers, and introducing standardized parts, a radical move in an era when most tools were still handmade. But what truly set John Deere apart wasn't just how the company built plows, it was why. Deere understood that farming wasn't just a job, it was a way of life. His mission wasn't to dominate markets, but to serve farmers, to make their work more efficient, their harvests more abundant, their lives more hopeful. Every product carried that purpose, and with it, a promise. John Deere himself was deeply involved in the business, but he wasn't content to simply sell tools. He built relationships. Farmers didn't just buy a plow, they bought trust. And that trust became the foundation for something powerful, a brand, one that represented reliability, integrity, and progress. When John Deere's son, Charles Deere, took over in the 1850s, he inherited not just a company, but a philosophy. Charles had a sharp business mind, and he saw the potential to scale what his father had started. Under his leadership, Deere and Company grew rapidly, opening branches, creating dealer networks, and establishing one of the first nationwide distribution systems for farm equipment. The plow wasn't just a tool anymore. It was part of an identity, the farmer's companion. By the 1870s, the company was producing tens of thousands of plows each year. Deere's signature designs became household names: the Moline plow, the Hawkeye, and the Prairie King. But it wasn't only about the machines. John Deere became synonymous with honesty, durability, and innovation, values that resonated deeply with the hardworking men and women who fed the nation. Even as competitors emerged, many cutting corners or chasing quick profits, Deere stayed true to his creed. I will never put my name on a product that does not have in it the best that is in me. This wasn't marketing, it was a moral compass, one that steered the company through every decision. And it was during this era that Deere's products began to carry something else: identity. The now iconic green and yellow colors started to appear, symbolizing the union between land and harvest, nature and prosperity. Over time, the leaping Deere logo evolved, becoming one of the most recognized emblems in industrial history. Farmers didn't just see a brand, they saw a reflection of themselves, resilient, dependable, and proud. Yet beneath the surface of this growth lay new challenges. Scaling production meant managing supply chains, financing, and competition in a volatile economy. Deere and Company faced pressures from cheaper imitators in shifting markets. But where others faltered, Deere's strength was in its values. The company didn't chase trends. It built relationships that lasted generations. As the Industrial Revolution swept across America, transforming industries and cities, Deere stood at the crossroads of tradition and innovation. It embraced new technologies, yet never abandoned its roots. While others pursued profit, Deere pursued purpose, the belief that every invention should serve those who toil in the fields. By the turn of the century, John Deere was no longer just a company. It was a movement, a partner in progress, a symbol of American ingenuity, and a beacon of trust. Its green and yellow machines dotted the countryside, their steady rhythm echoing across the heartland. But as the world marched toward a new century, storms were brewing. Economic crises, wars, and industrial upheavals that would test the strength of even the most trusted brands. For now, though, the green giant had taken root, forged not in steel alone, but in faith, integrity, and the enduring bond between farmer and field. Trials of steel, wars, depressions, and survival. As John Deere entered the 20th century, the company stood tall as a trusted name in American farming. The leaping deer symbol carried the weight of integrity, progress, and prosperity. But history has a way of testing even the strongest giants. For Deere and Company, the next chapters would not be written in smooth furrows of growth, but in the jagged scars of crisis, wars, depressions, and survival against the odds. The Great Depression of the 1930s brought American agriculture to its knees. Commodity prices collapsed, farmers faced foreclosure. Entire families walked away from the land their ancestors had worked for generations. Tractors and plows, once symbols of hope, now sat abandoned in dusty fields. For a company whose entire identity was tied to the farmer's prosperity, this was an existential threat. Most corporations in that era made a cold calculation, cut credit, tighten loans, and leave struggling customers behind. Deere and Company chose a different path. Against the advice of bankers and analysts, the company continued to extend credit to farmers, even when repayment was uncertain. They knew that abandoning their customers would mean betraying the very people who had built the brand. It was a dangerous gamble, one that pushed Deere to the brink of collapse. The company carried millions of dollars in unpaid debt, a burden that nearly sank it. But loyalty has a way of paying dividends that numbers can't capture. Farmers remembered who stood by them when the world turned cruel. When the economy eventually recovered, they repaid that loyalty with unwavering devotion to the green and yellow machines. John Deere didn't just survive the Depression, it cemented a reputation as a company that put people over profit. And then came World War II. Once again, Deere was called to adapt. Like Caterpillar, Ford, and countless other industrial giants, the company shifted production to support the war effort. Factories that once built tractors now produced military equipment, ammunition, and vehicles. Deere's Waterloo plant, famous for its tractors, became a crucial hub in manufacturing gear for the U.S. Army. The war transformed Deere from a domestic farm implement maker into a key player in the machinery of global conflict. When the war ended in 1945, Deere returned to peacetime production, but the world had changed. Farming was no longer the same small-scale, horse-drawn industry of the 19th century. Mechanization was spreading rapidly, and the demand for efficient, powerful tractors exploded. Deere was ready, but it had learned from its trials. Having weathered depression and war, the company knew resilience wasn't about avoiding hardship. It was about enduring it, learning from it, and emerging stronger. Through the 1940s and 1950s, Deere introduced machines that became icons of American agriculture, from the Model A to the legendary Model 4020. These tractors weren't just machines, they were symbols of survival. They stood for the farmer who had endured the Dust Bowl, the soldier who returned from war to reclaim his land, and the families who had clung to hope in the darkest times. But Deere's trials didn't end with economic collapse or global conflict. The post-war years brought new challenges: rapid industrial competition, changing technologies, and the rise of rivals determined to claim Deere's throne. International Harvester, Alice Chalmers, and Case fought fiercely for dominance in the tractor market. Every innovation was a battlefield, every design a contest of endurance. Still, Deere's strength wasn't just in steel or horsepower, it was in identity. Farmers didn't simply buy machines, they bought trust, reliability, and a brand that had proven itself in the harshest storms of history. Through loyalty, integrity, and sheer resilience, Deere had forged not just tractors, but a bond with the American farmer that no depression, no war, and no rival could break. By the time the mid-20th century arrived, John Deere was no longer just a manufacturer of plows and tractors. It was a symbol of survival, a company that had faced the darkest economic night in the most devastating global war, and emerged stronger, greener, and more trusted than ever. But history has a way of testing giants again and again. Ahead lay the greatest transformation of all, the tractor revolution that would propel Deere from a trusted brand into a global powerhouse. Innovation on wheels, the tractor revolution. For nearly a century, John Deere's reputation rested on the plow, the simple steel blade that had unlocked the prairies. But as the 20th century roared forward, farming was no longer just about breaking ground. The age of horse-drawn agriculture was ending, and a new era of mechanization was dawning. Across the countryside, the sound of hooves was giving way to the roar of engines. The question was no longer whether tractors would replace horses, but which company would lead the revolution. For John Deere, the answer began with a gamble, and a tractor called the Waterloo Boy. In 1918, Deere made a bold move by acquiring the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company in Iowa. At the time, Deere had little experience with gasoline engines, and many doubted whether the company known for plows could make the leap into machinery. But Deere's leadership understood something critical. The future of farming wasn't in horses, it was in horsepower. The Waterloo Boy tractor wasn't flashy, but it worked. Reliable, powerful, and affordable, it gave Deere an entry point into a growing industry. Farmers who had trusted Deere's plows for generations now turned to the company for machines that could plow faster, plant deeper, and harvest more. It was the first step in a transformation that would define John Deere's future. Through the 1920s and 1930s, Deere refined its tractors, but it wasn't until the Model D, introduced in 1923, that Deere truly made its mark. The Model D became a legend, the longest-running tractor in Deere's history, produced for nearly 30 years. With its rugged two-cylinder engine and unmistakable pop-pop sound, the Model D was more than a machine. It was the sound of progress rolling across the fields of America. Innovation became Deere's weapon in a brutal marketplace. Rivals like International Harvester and Allis-Chalmers fought fiercely for dominance. Each company sought the next breakthrough: more horsepower, better fuel efficiency, new designs. But Deere had something more valuable than specs. It had trust. Farmers knew that if a machine carried the leaping Deere, it carried the promise of reliability. The real turning point came in the 1960s with the release of the Model 4020. Known as the tractor that changed everything, the 4020 embodied a new era of power and versatility. Its diesel engine delivered unmatched performance, while its design emphasized comfort and ease of use. Farmers across the country hailed it as the best tractor of its generation. The 4020 became Deere's icon, a machine that didn't just lead the industry but defined it. But innovation in machinery alone wasn't enough. Deere invested heavily in research and development, creating testing facilities and engineering labs to push boundaries. They weren't just making tractors. They were reimagining farming itself. Hydraulic systems, power steering, safety features, and eventually electronic controls all emerged from Deere's relentless pursuit of progress. The tractor revolution also carried a cultural shift. Farming, once defined by human and animal muscle, became a partnership between man and machine. Fields grew larger, yields expanded, and rural America transformed. And at the center of it all was John Deere, whose green and yellow machines became as iconic to the American landscape as red barns and golden wheat fields. Still, Deere's journey wasn't without challenges. The transition to tractors was costly, and missteps in design or production could have crippled the company. At times, competitors threatened to outpace Deere with innovations of their own. But each crisis became a lesson, each setback a reason to improve. Where others stumbled, Deere pushed forward, fueled by its founding promise, never to put its name on a machine that wasn't the best it could be. By the late 20th century, John Deere was no longer just a plow company. It was a mechanical powerhouse, its tractors working the fields of not just America, but the world. The company had mastered the leap from iron blades to roaring engines, and in doing so it had redefined itself. The plow had built the company. The tractor had secured its empire. But the story of John Deere was far from over. Ahead lay economic turmoil, global expansion, and technological revolutions that would test even the mightiest machines. And once again, the green giant would be forced to adapt, or risk falling behind. Crisis and reinvention, the modern struggles. By the late 1970s, John Deere had become a symbol of strength, a trusted partner to farmers, a leader in machinery, and a global brand built on loyalty. The green and yellow machines rolled proudly across America's heartland, their engines humming with confidence. But beneath that steady rhythm, a storm was brewing, one that would test the company's soul and shake the very foundation of American agriculture. The 1980s farm crisis hit like a hammer, a perfect storm of economic forces. Rising interest rates, plummeting commodity prices, and crushing debt swept across rural America. Farmers who had borrowed heavily during the boom years of the 70s suddenly found themselves underwater. Land values collapsed. Bank foreclosures spread like wildfire. Families lost farms that had been in their names for generations. And for John Deere, a company whose heartbeat pulsed in sync with the farmer, the pain was personal. Tractor sales plunged, factories slowed, thousands of workers were laid off, dealers closed their doors. Deere, the green giant, was bleeding. It wasn't just a financial crisis, it was an identity crisis. How could a company built on trust survive when its customers were disappearing? How could it stay loyal to farmers when the very system that sustained them was collapsing? Once again, Deere's leadership faced a choice: retreat to protect the bottom line or double down on its core promise to stand with the farmer. Guided by its heritage, the company chose the harder path. It cut costs where it had to, but refused to abandon innovation or quality. Engineers continued to refine machines, building with the same durability and care even as profits dwindled. Deere also invested in diversification, stepping beyond agriculture into construction, forestry, and lawn care. If one market failed, others could sustain the mission. The crisis scarred the company, but it also hardened it, forging a leaner, more adaptive giant. When the farm economy began its slow recovery in the 1990s, Deere emerged more resilient, more diversified, and more forward-looking than ever. But survival wasn't enough. The world was changing fast. Globalization brought new competition from Europe and Asia. Environmental regulations demanded cleaner, more efficient engines. Farmers faced new pressures: precision, sustainability, and profit margins thinner than ever. Deere needed to evolve, not just as a manufacturer, but as a technology company. In the late 1990s and 2000s, Deere began its next transformation. It embraced digital innovation, pioneering GPS-guided tractors, automated steering systems, and data-driven precision farming. Machines were no longer just tools. They became intelligent partners, capable of analyzing soil, mapping fields, and optimizing harvests with surgical accuracy. The same company that once forged steel plows by hand was now building the backbone of smart agriculture. But with innovation came controversy. Some farmers began to question Deere's tight control over software and repairs, sparking debates over the right to repair. Could farmers truly own the machines they bought if they couldn't fix them themselves? It was a new kind of conflict, not about steel and soil, but about data and control. And yet, even in the face of criticism, Deere continued to push forward, investing heavily in automation, electrification, and artificial intelligence. Throughout these modern struggles, one truth remained constant. John Deere's identity was still rooted in the same promise forged in the 1800s to help farmers do more, endure more, and build more. Crisis after crisis, the company had learned to adapt, not by abandoning its past, but by reinventing it for the future. By the 2000s, Deere had become more than a machinery maker. It was a global solutions provider, a pioneer in sustainable farming, and a symbol of endurance in an unpredictable world. From blacksmith shop to tech powerhouse, the journey was anything but smooth. But every hardship became a stepping stone to reinvention. Still, one question lingers. As machines become smarter and fields more automated, can the company that built its legacy on human grit stay true to the spirit of the farmer? The answer lies not in the past, but in the legacy Deere continues to build. One machine, one innovation, one promise at a time. The legacy of the leaping Deere. From the clang of a blacksmith's hammer in 1837 to the hum of GPS-guided tractors in the 21st century, John Deere's story is more than a chronicle of machines. It's a testament to the enduring spirit of innovation, resilience, and trust. The leaping Deere, etched in green and gold, has become more than a logo. It's a symbol of progress, perseverance, and partnership with those who feed the world. What began with a simple steel plow that sliced through stubborn Midwestern soil evolved into a global empire shaping the face of agriculture. For nearly 2 centuries, Deere has stood beside farmers through droughts, depressions, wars, and revolutions, both mechanical and digital. Each era left its scars, but also its lessons. Adapt or perish, innovate or fade, listen or lose. Today, the fields tell a different story. Tractors steer themselves with precision measured in inches. Drones map crops from the sky. Algorithms predict yields before the first seed touches the ground. And in the middle of this high-tech landscape, one name continues to echo across the horizon: John Deere. Yet legacy is not built by machines alone. It's built by values, forged in times of trial, tempered by decades of loyalty, and refined through unbroken trust. Deere's commitment to quality, integrity, and purpose has remained unwavering. In a world obsessed with speed and profit, the company still holds to its founding belief that the farmer deserves tools as strong and reliable as the hands that guide them. Still, the future brings new questions. As agriculture moves toward automation and artificial intelligence, what becomes of the human touch that once defined the land? Will the next generation of farmers trust algorithms as they once trusted the plow? Deere now stands at another crossroads, between heritage and horizon, between the soil and the cloud. In response, the company is writing its next chapter. It's investing in electric tractors, autonomous vehicles, and sustainable farming technologies. It's designing systems that reduce emissions, optimize water use, and empower farmers to grow more with less. The goal is no longer just productivity, it's responsibility, feeding the world while protecting the planet. Yet, through every transformation, one constant remains: the relationship with the farmer. It's more than business. It's a bond built on shared struggle, shared triumph, and mutual respect. From small family operations to massive agribusinesses, Deere's machines are more than tools. They're partners, extensions of human will and hope. Walk through any rural town in America, and you'll see the leaping Deere on barns, hats, and bumper stickers, not as a corporate brand, but as a badge of pride. Generations have grown up with it, inherited it, trusted it, because John Deere's story is not just about a company, it's about people, the dreamers, the workers, the builders, the farmers who believed that better was always possible. And so, as the world faces new challenges, climate change, population growth, shifting economies, Deere's mission endures: to serve those who cultivate the earth. Its machines may evolve, Its technologies may change, but its heart beats to the same rhythm that began in a small Illinois workshop nearly 2 centuries ago. The legacy of the leaping Deere is not measured in profits or patents. It's measured in acres tilled, in harvests brought home, in families who endured because their machines did not fail. It's a story of grit, of adaptation, and of faith. In the land, in innovation, and in the idea that progress should serve people, not the other way around. From plow to processor, from forge to field, John Deere's journey is the story of America itself, a story of hard work, resilience, and the endless chase toward a better tomorrow. The Deere still leaps, not away from its past, but toward a future where the bond between human and machine continues to grow, rooted in trust, powered by innovation, and guided by purpose. And that is the enduring legacy of John Deere.